Welcome back to Deen Dharma. I'm your host, Shema. Today we're exploring a profound spiritual and existential phenomenon called selfing the self. In the modern world, we often talk about self-care or self-improvement, but we rarely ask, which self are you talking about? Most of us live our lives as half people. We're like a house where the furniture is arranged, the garden is tended, but the resident, the true master of the house, hasn't moved in yet. Today we'll be drawing from the timeless wisdom of Islamic spirituality, specifically from the insights of Imam Al-Ghazali, alongside the profound experiential clarity of Buddhist awareness. We're going to look at the transition from being a mere biological body or a bundle of psychological identities to becoming a fully grounded, conscious manifestation of the divine. When we speak of selfing the self, we're not talking about building a better ego or acquiring a new spiritual identity or playing around with metaphors. We're actually talking about an inner shift. We're talking about who you actually are at the root of existence. As the ancient Islamic saying states, he who knows himself knows his Lord. Imam Al-Ghazali, the great master of the heart, emphasized that this is the absolute starting point of the spiritual path. Knowing yourself is not a psychological exercise. It's actually a unique portal to knowing the divine. If you do not know the truth of your own self, you cannot know the truth of God. Today, we're going to decode what it means to step out of the illusion of being a fragmented half-person and step into the reality of the whole. We think we're autonomous. We say, I want, I feel, I think. We anchor our entire existence onto a collection of memories, social roles, or gender identities. But who is this I? In Buddhism, the Buddha dismantled the rigid I using the 5 skandhas: form, sensation, perception, mental habits, and consciousness. The Buddha showed that what we call me is not a solid, unchanging soul trapped in a fleshy cage. It's actually a high-speed collision of these 5 streams. When we cling to being these passing phenomena as a fixed permanent self, we become half people. Why? Because we're identifying with fleeting ripples on the surface of the ocean rather than the vast ocean itself. We mistake the scenery for the viewer, and grounding this self-knowledge in Buddhism means realizing that you're not your thoughts, you're not your labels, and you're not your identity. You're actually a spacious, empty, luminous awareness in which they all arise and dissolve. In Islamic metaphysics, the greatest barrier to reality is shirk, and this is often translated as idolatry. But the mystics and the scholars show us that the subtlest, most dangerous form of shirk is dualistic perception. It's ananiya, the egoistic illusion that says there's a self-existent me over here and then a self-existent God over there. Imam Al-Ghazali taught that the human being is actually a microcosmos, a perfect mirror designed to reflect the macrocosmos and the divine attributes. He asserted that your physical body, your social status, and your worldly ego are merely the outer shell. If you limit your identity to this, you are committing zulm al-nafs, which is wronging your soul. And you wrong yourself by believing you're just a half-person subject to the laws of decay and biological fear, completely blind to the treasure locked within your heart. To know yourself, Ghazali argued, you must look inward to find the ruh, the spirit, the spark of the divine breath within you that does not belong to the world of matter. This aligns perfectly with the foundational declaration in chapter 57 of the Quran in Surah Al-Hadid, which translates into the iron, verse 3. Allah says, هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ وَالظَّاهِرُ وَالْبَاطِنُ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. He is the first, and the last, and the outward, and the inward, and he is knowing of all things. If we stop treating this as a metaphor, if God is fundamentally the outward and the inward, where do you, as a separate, independent entity, exist? If you think you possess an existence that's completely detached from the all-encompassing reality of God, you're living a lie. You are a half-self living in an illusion. There's a famous teaching that's often cited in Buddhist circles about a beggar who sat on an old, dirty wooden chest for 30 years, asking passerbys for spare change. He lived his whole life in misery, cold, and hunger, a half-person trapped into a narrative of lack. When he finally died, the townspeople broke open the rusted lock of the chest he'd been sitting on and found that it was filled with solid gold. He didn't need to find gold. He needed to look down and recognize what he already was sitting on. Selfing the self is the act of opening that chest. In light of the Sufi insight of Imam Al-Ghazali's teachings, that gold is your inherent fitrah, your pristine human nature encoded with the capacity to reflect the divine qualities, such as compassion, power, and love. You are a beggar only as long as you look outward, begging to the world for validation, or love, or a god in the clouds to save you. The moment you look inward and you know your true self, you realize you're the chest of gold itself. Knowing yourself is knowing the source. So how do we transition from illusion to reality? In Islam, this is the systematic shift from the nafs, which is the conditioned, reactive, egoic self, to the ruh, which is the unconditioned spirit that's aligned with the divine. Let's examine a profound verse from the Quran, chapter 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, titled The Cow, verse 138. Allah says, Sibghat Allah, wa man ahsanu min Allahi sibgha, wa nahnu lahu abidun. This translates into take on Allah's color, or dye, in whose color is better than Allah's. It is Him we worship. The word sibgha in Arabic literally means to dye or color. Imagine a white cloth. In its half state, it's blank, vulnerable to any stain. Selfing the self is like dipping that cloth into the divine dye. The cloth doesn't cease to be cloth, it doesn't disappear, but it's now defined, strengthened, and made beautiful by the color it has taken on. When you are dyed in the divine dye, in presence, your personality, your quirks, your talents, your voice, they don't vanish. It just finally becomes vibrant and colorful. Think of a single drop of water. If it stays isolated on a leaf, it's a fragile drop, vulnerable to evaporating into the sun, isolated, living in fear of its end. But when that drop falls into the ocean, it doesn't die in the sense of being destroyed. It loses its boundaries and it becomes the ocean. It is selfed into its truest magnitude. This reality is explicitly laid out in a famous Hadith Qudsi, a divine saying narrated by Prophet Muhammad. Quote, My servant draws near to me with nothing more loved by me than the religious duties I have enjoined upon him, until I love him. When I love him, I become his hearing, with which he hears, his seeing, in which he sees, his hand, with which he strikes, and his foot, with which he walks. This isn't just a poetic metaphor, it's an experiential description of absolute self-knowledge. When you remove the interference of the egoic I, you realize you are a point of manifestation for the whole. You stop being a fragmented half-person struggling with a tiny, anxious willpower, and you become an unhindered agent for the universal will. The act of selfing is the profound realization, I'm not a biological animal who happens to have a soul. I'm a soul manifesting through this biological body. Let's be entirely clear. This realization is not about floating away on a cloud of passive spirituality that's detached. It's actually the ultimate form of empowerment. When we move from being half people to selfed individuals, we stop changing our thoughts and start changing our source of power. In the Buddhist tradition, we speak of the luminous mind. Think of your primary awareness as a pristine, high-powered searchlight. By its very nature, it's radiant, clear, and vast. However, over time, the suit of daily life, trauma, fears, social conditioning, and the compulsive voice saying, I'm not enough and I'm my labels, settles heavily on the glass lens. The half-person looks around, sees only shadows, and concludes that the light inside them is broken. They spend their entire life trying to buy new lamps, chasing external validation, or begging others for a candle. But the whole person looks inward and realizes the light was never the problem. You do not need to manufacture brilliance, confidence, or peace. You just need to clean the suit off the glass. Empowerment is that aha moment when you stop trying to build false ego confidence and simply let your inherent radiance shine unhindered. Your willpower is no longer a small, flickering battery that runs out. It's plugged directly into the cosmic grid. This connects perfectly to the Quranic concept of the Khalifa. We often hear this translated as leader or successor, but in the context of Imam Al-Ghazali's insight, a Khalifa is someone who acts as a representative of the divine qualities on earth. Think of it this way: a half person is reactive. If someone is mean to them, they get angry. If they lose money, they fall into despair. They're like a dry leaf blown around by the wind of circumstances. But when you self the self, you become creative. You stop asking, what is the world doing to me? And start asking, what does the divine want to manifest through this body right now? If you walk into a room of suffering, you don't just feel pity. You become the channel for Ar-Rahman, which is the all-compassionate. When a situation requires a stand for truth, you don't check to see if it's popular. You tap into Al-Qawi, the all-strong. And when life gets confusing, you don't panic. You lean into Al-Hakim, the all-wise. This is a shift from reactive living to creative manifestation. You are no longer a victim of the script, but you become an actor who knows the director's intent. You're the mirror that has been polished so well that when people look at you, they don't just see you. They see a reflection of something much greater. You are finally, fully a resident in your own home. So, how do we move this out of the realm of philosophy into real life? Here are 3 practical, grounded practices to cultivate this state daily. Number 1 is the practice of neti neti or alfana, which is just the concept of de-identification. The action here is to sit quietly for 5 minutes every morning. As thoughts, emotions, or bodily sensations arise, look at them and mentally say, I'm aware of this thought, therefore I'm not this thought. I'm aware of this anxiety, therefore I'm not this anxiety. I'm aware of this identity, therefore I'm not this identity. The goal here is to strip away the false forms to expose the core, unconditioned consciousness that's underneath. Number 2 is polishing the mirror through dhikr, which is remembrance of God. The action is to choose a divine quality you need, like Al-Hakim for wisdom, Al-Wadud for love. Recite it internally, not as a spell to bring something from the outside, but as a little chime to awaken that frequency that's already encoded into your divine nature. The goal here is, when a trigger happens throughout the day, pause for 1 conscious breath before reacting. It's in that gap that you clean the glass of your mind and you can act from your center, not your conditioning. And then number 3 is something I've been doing more often, which is Ghazali's evening audit, muhasaba. Before you sleep, look back at your day without judgment. Ask yourself, in my interactions today, did I operate as a biological animal reacting to fear and pride? Or did I operate as a Khalifa, a leader reflecting the attributes of the soul? The goal here is to actively track when you abdicate the house and when you actually reside in it. To conclude our time together, let's move away from understanding to direct experiencing. Find a comfortable seat, straighten your spine to allow a free flow of presence, but keep your shoulders completely soft. Let your hands rest easily on your lap. Close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath in through your nose. Your breath is the immediate bridge between your physical form and the spirit. Inhale. Imagine you are drawing from the ruh, the very breath of God that gave you life before the world gave you a name. Feel the qualities of wisdom, peace, and power entering the body as pure potential. And then exhale. Let go of your worldly labels. Release your job title, your worries, your past mistakes, and your social anxieties. Shed the heavy garment of being a half person. Now bring awareness to your mind. Notice your thoughts passing through the clouds across an open sky. Notice the sensations in your body. Gently realize you are the sky, not the clouds. You are a vast container of awareness in which these sensations happen. You do not need to fight your thoughts. You do not need to believe them. You can simply rest back as a silent witness. Now visualize your heart center as a circular mirror. For years, it has been turned downward, covered in the heavy suit of egoic worries, self-doubt, or defense mechanisms. Visualize a gentle, warm wind, the Nafs ar-Rahman, the breath of the all-compassionate, blowing across the surface into your heart, cleaning the dust away. See the mirror turning upward, facing the infinite sky of reality. Notice that your heart does not need to manufacture its own light. It simply catches the external light of the divine and becomes the entirely luminous with it. Feel that light from your heart mirror expanding outward. It saturates your physical chest, flows down your arms, fills your brain, radiates beyond your skin. Here, the luminous mind of Buddhist thought and divine presence of Islamic tradition meet in absolute, undivided unity. There's no longer a separate, anxious half-person trying desperately to be good or spiritual. There's only a whole being resting perfectly in the light of the source. Silently, with absolute conviction, repeat these truths in your mind. I'm not my passing thoughts. I'm the awareness in which they rise. I'm not my worldly identity. I'm a mirror for the divine qualities. I'm not separate. I'm thoroughly grounded in the source of all being. Now slowly, gently bring your awareness back to the physical weight of the body on the chair. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Take one more deep, grounding breath. As you open your eyes, do not leave this space behind. You're not going back to a house without a resident. You are the resident, and the divine is the light illuminating every single room. Stop living as a half-person. Start knowing who you are. Start selfing the self. Join me next time on Deen Dharma. Until then, stay awake, stay grounded, stay whole. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you.